You two. You two are ridiculous. I can't believe you buy a bunch of stuff and never use it.
You need to hush.
You're listening to the Creative Faith and Friends podcast, episode number 12.
Oh, I got you. There's no reason to chasing payment on my own. 'Cause you're here to stay every night and day. I'm delighted 'cause I got you. La, 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 la.
Well, welcome to Creative Faith and Friends podcast. I'm Melissa Ohlson with pinkpaperpeppermints.com, and I'm here today with my two co-hosts, Lauri. Hi, Lauri.
Hey, friends.
And Jessica. Hi, Jess.
Hello.
We're starting a new series today on mixed media. We're going to talk about mixed media for the next few episodes. And so today we thought we would start with talking about your background, just how you start a mixed media page in your art journal. We're going to talk about painting your background. We're going to give you some tips and ideas for that. But first, we have Happy Mail.
Yay.
Yay.
And so I'm going to read this one by Tammy. It's was on our printing episode, and she says, I absolutely loved episode 10. I love listening to your podcast more than once. That's all I'm saying. So sweet. Thank you so much for the free tags printable. I can't wait to try the double printing layering technique. And that's why I gave that printable to our newsletter subscribers, is like a tag and then some vintage text so that they could try doing the double printing. And I wanted to try it too, and I haven't even tried it yet. Did y'all try it yet?
Yep.
I've done it on accident before, but I haven't tried it again.
I'm going to try it with that tag. I gave a blank tag and then some double printing, which I will put in the shop. If you weren't part of the newsletter, it'll be in the shop. And then make sure and subscribe to the newsletter, because I send out printables for our listeners every week.
Yep.
Yes, and they're awesome.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. Let's see, where was I? And she says, I too love the Chosen series about Jesus' life and his disciples. I'm watching season 1 over and can't wait for each new episode release. As always, I love listening to you gals talk about the Bible, faith, and getting crafty. You are all such a blessing to us. I FaceTime my niece who lives in a different state than me, and we craft and listen to your podcast together.
Oh,
Isn't that so cool?
I love that.
That is so cool.
Tammy, thank you so much for telling us about that, because I just love that. That's so cool. And yeah, The Chosen, I've heard from so many people since we did that episode about that they love The Chosen too. So I'm glad a lot of other people are watching it, because it's so good. So if you would like to share something with us on Happy Meal, it doesn't just have to be telling us how great we are.
Nope.
But it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, we love that. But it can be a question. If you have a question for us, we would love to answer your questions. Or if you have a tip about what we talk about in an episode, or an idea, or a funny story to tell, anything like that, we would love to share that with our listeners. So leave us a comment on the blog at pinkpaperpeppermints.com/podcast, or you can leave us a review and tell us something on iTunes. We would love that too. And we will share it in Happy Mail. Okay, so today we are talking about mixed media, and we're going to talk about painting backgrounds. First of all, we wanted to talk about a couple of different kinds of paints. Obviously, there are so many ways you can do backgrounds in your journal, so we're not going to be able to cover everything, but we wanted to talk a little bit about 3 of the kinds of paints that we like to use, and those are acrylics, watercolor, and gouache. Now, I say we like to use on gouache. That for me is a future like to use, because I bought a whole bunch of gouache paint after taking Pam Garrison's Creative Bug class, which I will link that in the show notes. I linked that in a previous episode, but she has a class on painting abstract wildflowers that is so cool. And she uses gouache. And so I bought a bunch of gouache so that I can do that class, but I haven't actually used it yet. So have you guys used gouache before?
Yes. We did a class with gouache with Let's Make Art last summer. And or maybe in the fall, but at some point when we were doing the Zoom watercolor sessions, we used gouache. And so it's a completely different medium, but I like it. I didn't think I would, and I like it.
I like it too. It's real smooth, and it's a little bit more color payoff, I think, than watercolor, depending, I guess, on how you use it.
Yeah.
It's really a cool medium.
It is.
Well, I can't wait to play with it. I did a little bit of research on it, and from my understanding, and y'all tell me if I'm right about this, it's basically like an opaque watercolor. So it's still blendable, and it will reactivate with water.
Yeah, it is definitely more opaque than watercolor.
but it has that soft look to it.
Hmm.
It does. It's a little thicker than watercolor, even in using it when you're applying it with the brush. It's got a different texture to it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
But it is, to me, it is almost a good medium between, there is a difference, and I'm going to go there, but between acrylic and watercolor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's got
Agreed.
enough opaqueness similar to acrylic, but it paints more like a watercolor.
Mhm.
So it's got like a matte finish.
It does. It does.
Where acrylic has a really shiny finish. And the good thing about acrylic is that you can layer it and it's not going to move on you
Yes.
once it's dry. But I guess with gouache, it will move because it's water soluble.
Yes.
It's going to reactivate. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to playing with that. But those are the three that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about acrylics. Now, we have a whole episode on acrylic paint. That is episode number 4. So if you want to hear more in more detail, we're probably not going to get into as much detail about our favorites and some tips and techniques. You can listen to episode 4. And then watercolor, I think watercolor is the easiest to make pretty backgrounds with.
Yes.
If you want pastel. Now, if you want bright poppy colors, you're not going to get that as much with watercolor, although I have some by Jane Davenport that are really bright.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really easy because you can just squirt your paper with water and then just start dipping your brush in it, and you can have a beautiful
Yeah.
background. You don't even have to do anything, really.
And you can smush it like you do the inks and stuff, and it
Yeah.
creates
Yeah.
a really abstract, pretty background.
And one of my favorite parts of watercolor is blooming. I
Yes.
love
Yes.
blooming. If you don't know what blooming is, that's what happens when you get your surface wet and then add watercolor, and it just kind of spreads out. It's so pretty.
Like to dip the tip of your brush in that water on your page, and it
Mhm.
just absorbs the color from your brush, and it blooms out like a flower.
Mhm.
Yeah. That
It's
is
really pretty.
It's so fun to do, even if you're not trying to make anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah.
so fun to watch. Yeah.
Mhm.
So my favorite watercolors, I think, are those ones that I have by Jane Davenport. They're just in a pan, and it's because the colors are so bright. But I remember, Jess, you talking about in one of our other episodes that you had liquid watercolor.
I do have some
Mhm.
liquid.
I still have not used that. I bought liquid watercolor. Y'all remember me telling you in that episode, and I still haven't used it. I haven't even opened the package yet.
These are the Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrocolor.
Yeah, that's what I bought.
Yes, that's what I have.
You two are ridiculous. I can't believe you buy a bunch of stuff and never use
You
it.
need to hush, because don't you have these too, Laurie?
Yeah. No, I don't have those, but I have plenty of
okay.
other things.
Okay.
I was going to say.
Somebody in our watercolor group, it may have been Michelle, I don't remember, but anyway, really encouraged me buying these. That's all it took. They are super vibrant, very pigmented, with lots of color, but I will say they do not reactivate like your pan watercolors.
Really?
Oh, really?
I don't find that they move quite as well on a surface once they're down as the pan watercolors.
Interesting.
Well, I'll have to add that to my list of things to
Yes.
play with and
Yes.
open.
Don't we also have some from Let's Make Art? Isn't that what they sent
We
us?
do. Yes.
Yeah.
We do.
Mhm. Now, those seem to move pretty well, don't you think?
They do. They do.
So maybe it's just the brand of P.H. Martin. They just react a little differently.
Maybe.
Interesting.
So that's gouache, watercolor, acrylics, and then inks are another way to do really pretty backgrounds.
Mhm.
Yes.
We have an episode where we talked about inks. That's episode number 3. So if you want to hear all of our details on inks, you can listen to episode number 3. What about tools? So I know that you two probably agree with me on this, but my favorite tool to use with paint and inks and everything when I'm doing backgrounds is the new craft heat tool. It's not new, but it's
Oh,
new
yeah.
to us.
Yes.
We all 3
Mhm.
ordered it. And I am so in love with that thing.
Yes.
It
Agreed.
is-
Completely.
And I'm sorry, y'all. It's pouring rain here, so if you hear thunder in the background,
Oh, I don't hear it.
I don't
do
hear
you-
it at all.
okay.
Mm-mm.
Well, that's what it is. If anybody hears it. So yeah, the craft tea tool is amazing. It is really quiet. It's so much more quiet
Mhm.
than my embossing gun,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
and the air doesn't blow everything all over the table. I mean, it
Yeah.
does a little bit, but not as much.
It is dispersed so much better than
Yeah.
that concentrated flow
Yeah.
of air at the center.
And it doesn't seem to burn my paper if I accidentally leave it in the same place for too long. It seems to be a lot more user friendly to me, but I don't
Mhm.
know.
Well, I totally agree. You know, I asked y'all before I ordered it if I should order it, thinking you would tell me no.
I said yes.
So,
We were both like, you need to buy it.
yes, I know. And I was super skeptical, but that is one of my greatest finds recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, what about other tools that you guys use for backgrounds? Now, we're going to do an episode on mark making, so we're not going to get into mark making tools today, but
Yeah.
just as far as painting backgrounds, what do you think is one of your favorite tools?
Well, I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I really like brushes.
Oh my. Thank you,
I
Lauri.
mean,
That's a great tip.
Thank
Wow.
you. Another profundity shared by Lauri.
Any specific brushes there, my dear?
Well, we do have the Let's Make Art watercolor brush, which actually is what I go to when I'm doing watercolor, just because, I don't know, it seems to work really well. I don't know a lot about brushes and different types and different brands and all that kind of stuff, but I like this one quite a bit. So that's my go-to. Is a number 6.
A number 6. That's what I was
Yes.
going to ask you.
Yep, number 6.
If we're talking about watercolor brushes, I like the Da Vinci number 6. And they've got several different types within their brand. Like they have a junior, they have I don't even know all the names of them, but I use the Da Vinci Junior number 6 and I like it a lot.
Yeah, I don't know all the numbers and everything either. I tend to, I have like a big can with brushes in it, and so I just grab whichever one. And honestly, the thing that I like to use probably the most to do backgrounds is an old piece of paper, some chipboard or an old credit card, or especially if you cut ridges in it or
I hadn't thought about that.
Make marks.
Make designs with it, and then you can kind of create this textured paint background.
Yes.
I really like to do that.
I have some of the Jane Davenport mermaid brushes that have the mermaid tails, and they have the different mark makings on the tails. So once you put your acrylic down, you can scrape them through it, and those are really cool.
I did not know that was a thing.
That's a thing.
Are they water brushes?
No. They're turquoise. They're old. I don't know if you can still get them or not.
They used to have them at Michael's. She might have them on her website. She still carries a lot of stuff that they don't carry at Michael's anymore. She carries it on her website, but then it's shipping from Australia, so it takes a while to get here. But
yeah, these brushes are great for like acrylic painting, but they have the textured tails. Now, if I'm putting down gesso or acrylic paint, it's called a Catalyst by Princeton, a 04 Mini, and it's like a silicone scrapey, wedgy thing. And if you saw the thing, you would know that I use it a ton because there's stuff all over it. But it is wonderful because it doesn't matter what builds up on it. It just scrapes right off, and it's angled just enough to make it really easy to put things down on your page, and you can just create a real cool abstract background with that.
Yeah, I've seen people use that before too, but I've never thought about getting one because I just use whatever happens to be laying on my desk. But that sounds a lot better. It sounds better than just using, which reminds me, I completely skipped. We were going to talk about gesso first.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
About preparing
you have to spell it so we can all decide how we say it.
Right. I, at one point, called it gesso. As if you listen to earlier episodes, I think it was episode number 2. If you want to hear the very embarrassing story about that, you can listen to episode number 2.
It's worth a listen, for sure.
But what I meant to start off telling you was you can art journal in any book, even like a spiral notebook. If you prepare your page, it can take paint. You know, obviously some paper's better. Mixed media paper's obviously going to hold up better. But you can paint on anything if you use gesso first. And gesso is kind of like a primer for paper. It just gives it a nice surface for you to paint on, and it gives some sturdiness to your paper. So if you have really thin paper, gesso works well. I love that Jess got her gesso tip in, even though I completely forgot to talk about it. That was just what else? Didn't you have another gesso tip?
I did. I love gesso. Like, I love mixing it with, you can mix it with acrylics. You can mix it with, I know we have mentioned before the magicals, Lindy Stamp Game magicals, the pigmented powders.
I love those things.
That is one of the neatest things to mix with gesso because for some reason, you see all the little flecks of color if you use it in gesso, and you can make it scrape on your page really cool. That just hit me as we're talking about it, but that It works better than mixing those with like white acrylic paint. I don't know if it's because of what gesso is made of, or I don't know, but it does. It is such a cool process.
So when you mix it, do you actually put out some gesso and mix the color in, or do you just put the gesso down and then put the powders over it? Okay.
Both. I've done both. And like now I would not mix it to where you can't see the powder anymore if you're mixing it on a palette. I wish I could see my hand motions I'm doing as I'm saying this. I'm like mixing it while we talk.
I'm sure they're super helpful.
Yeah. I have like put it on a palette, sprinkled those on, and kind of folded it up to then transfer to your paper and scrape it down.
That is so cool. That. I can't wait to try that. Yeah. Because I have those powders.
Another thing is, especially with like Bible pages, if you're wanting to be able to see your background and you don't have clear gesso, because you can get clear white and black, white tends to be more readily available than the other colors of gesso. You can water it down a bit and don't like pour water into it, but if you spritz it with a little water, it will water it down to be a little more transparent, but still serve the purpose of protecting your page.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like a wash almost.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, while we're talking about changing the consistency of gesso, does anyone know how to make your gesso thicker? Because the gesso that I have, I feel like it's too thin. Like I can see more than I want to through it sometimes.
I can tell you.
Tell me.
You buy heavy gesso. Heavy gesso.
Gesso. Wow.
We could not talk about pronouncing these wrong before we start talking about them.
Well, that's the thing is I was trying not to buy something else, Jess.
Okay, so put 2 coats of it on instead of 1.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try that.
I wonder if you added a little white acrylic paint in with it.
Oh, that's a good idea. Well, I've seen people use gesso and it seems to be a little more textural. So like it dries a little bit more, not so flat. And I think that's probably what I'm confused about achieving. But since I only have one kind of gesso, that would explain that.
They're probably using more of the heavy gesso.
Heavier.
Heavy body,
okay. Yeah, I'll have to try that.
And like you said, there's different colors that you can get. So there's a lot of fun experimenting that you can do with that to do your backgrounds. So, okay, well, let's talk about some tips for different backgrounds that you can do. My first tip would be if you open your art journal and you're just like, I have no idea what to start with, just start with some paper. A great way to use your scraps is to collage a background on your page to paint over. And you don't even have to think about what's on the paper unless you want to. Like Jess was saying, you can do a wash of gesso over it and then you'll still be able to see what's on your paper if you like it. But really what you want to do is just start doing that. And it's kind of like a warm up and to give texture to your page. So you just rip up little pieces of paper and glue them to the page. And you can use gesso to glue them down, or you can just use matte medium or something. And you just cover the whole page in little bits of paper. And it's going to just give you a nice texture and it's going to take away that blank page feeling. And it gets you warmed up. It gets you in that creative mode, which I think a lot of times is the first hurdle, is just getting yourself making something. And then once you do that, it's like, oh, now I know what I want to make. But you kind of had to start making something first.
Yes.
So that's a really good one, is to just tear up bits of paper. Or if you want to do a pattern paper background, like all my printable pattern paper, you can use that. Now for me, I use Durabright ink and I can gesso right over that or do like a clear wash over it and it doesn't smear because of the ink I use. If you don't have that kind of ink and your ink smears, I just saw a really, really good tip, and that was to get a can of clear Rust-Oleum clear coat like you get at Home Depot for like spraying furniture. And obviously you want to do this outside with a box, but lay your printable down that you want to paint over and just do a quick swish of that clear coat over it.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Isn't that a great idea?
Yeah.
I know. I was like, oh my gosh, that is such a good idea. Because I've had people tell me they want to do some of the techniques that I show with my printables, but there's smears because they don't have the same ink as I do. So,
oh, yeah.
I wonder if you could use like an art fixative.
Yeah,
I bet
I
you
was
could.
thinking that too, but I think the Rust-Oleum stuff is cheaper, which is
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
they were saying use that. But yeah, if you have an art fixative, I bet that would work.
I did a little test of the ink that comes with the HP inkjet printers,
Mm-hmm.
and I did not do a big scale one, so I don't know if we were to gesso the whole page, but I sprayed some water on it. I kind of tried to play around with it, and it seemed to stay. So
Really?
check your print. I mean, check just
Yeah.
a scrap piece of paper and see if it stays or if it smears or what.
Yeah, see if it works.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I've heard people use hairspray before. My only concern about that would be the pH, like the acid level in
Gotcha.
it. If it would
Oh.
yellow over
Mhm.
time, which it might not matter if that's going to be under a layer and you're not making a masterpiece, you're just playing in your journal, then it's
Yeah.
no big deal. But if you're concerned about that, that's just something to think about with that. But anyway, so I've got tons and tons of printable papers. Most of my kits come with 2 or 3 papers. And I have, this is a little hint that you two know about, that everyone doesn't know about, but I have
Mhm.
a really cool line coming out that is going to
Yes.
have to do with collage, and it's going to be really fun. So that is another way to start your page, is just to cover it with paper. And then you can completely paint over it if you want to, but it breaks that blank page
Yep.
feeling. Okay, what about y'all? Any tips that you have
To get started, you mean?
to get started, or just painting, just
Okay.
creating backgrounds?
Yep. Go ahead, Jess.
Well, my thought was going to be just find what's laying around to start with your
Mhm.
backgrounds. If you're using paints, watercolor, acrylic, gouache, you can grab bubble wrap or packaging or whatever and lay it on top of your wet paint and then pull it
Oh,
off,
yeah.
and it'll create some cool texturing designs.
Mhm. Yeah, another cool way to do texture is, I think I learned this from Claudine Helmuth. I don't know if y'all know her. She's a collage artist. Once you get some paper down or a little bit of paint, take some masking tape and rub it into the page and then pull it up real fast.
Oh.
And it kind of just tears the paper a little bit. And if you've
Mhm.
got pattern paper down, it'll take a layer of it off, or like an old book page, it'll take a layer of it off. And then it
Yeah.
just creates this really cool vintagey texture on your background.
Oh, that's a
So cool.
cool idea.
Yeah. So that's another one.
I like
Tearing
that.
strips of paper and then lining them up next to each other, all different papers, looks really cool. And then you can do, like you said, do a gesso wash over it. So
Mhm.
it puts this white haze over it. And you can still see your papers, but they're in the background. And so it creates a lot of depth.
And sometimes I'll just start. What is that?
That's the thunder.
Wow.
Is it really?
That's the first time I've
Yes.
heard it.
Wow.
I know, it's so loud, y'all.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
I know.
sometimes when I start a background, I'll just pick up some paint, watercolor, and just start smushing it around on the paper and see what
Yeah.
happens. And because the odds of me covering it up are good if I don't like it. But if I
Yeah.
do, I can work with it. So
Yep.
that's what I like, to try to just start something.
Yeah. And another fun thing to do is, if you have baby wipes, which I always
Oh,
keep
yeah.
a big tub of baby wipes. Baby wipes are really cool for blending. So you get a bunch of paint on the page, just 2 or 3 blobs, stay in one color family usually for this: blue, green, purple, and then just take your baby wipe and smear it across, and it just blends it and creates this really blended look.
Oh,
Yep.
that's a cool idea.
Yeah, and you can do that with stencils too. So if you have some paint down, then you put your stencil down and then take the baby wipe and wipe it
Yes.
across the stencil.
Mm-hmm.
It'll just pull up the paint in the stencil.
Yes.
And then pick up your stencil, and then you've got this really cool sort of design that it just creates a lot of interest.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really cool.
So, Lauri, didn't you have a tip too, or you had something else that you wanted to share?
Yes, one of my favorite things to use for backgrounds is distress inks and distress oxides. I love to take clear packaging, like, what do you call that? You know.
Acetate or plastic.
Yeah, and even like a baggie
Cello
or
bag.
something, squished up or something. It just makes a neat texture in the inks. And sometimes I'll put it directly on the paper, or sometimes I'll put it onto the baggie or whatever I'm using and just smush it on the paper after that. And I like both of those techniques quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you mean like the distress ink pads?
You can do pads or sprays.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
If you do a pad, you just kind of smush it onto, let's just use a baggie, for example, so that we all know what we're talking about. But you just kind of squish it on there, spritz it with a little water, and smush it on your paper. And the same for sprays. You can do it on your mat too, on your nonstick mat or your glass mat. Sometimes I'll just spray on there, spray a little water, and smush it around. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds pretty.
That's one of my new favorite things is to smush all those inks around. It makes me happy.
And I like that word smush.
Yeah, me too. Smush. Yes.
That's a legitimate art word.
I
It
agree.
is.
Yes, absolutely.
There's one more thing I wanted to mention about gesso. We talked about how to use it and different tips with it, but also brands of gesso can be very different. I know the first time I used gesso, I don't remember the brand, but it was one that I picked up at Michael's or Hobby Lobby in the fine art supplies. And I was miserable with it because it was gritty.
Oh.
And it wasn't until I accidentally picked up a small bottle of Dina Wakley's gesso that I realized they weren't all alike. And hers are so smooth and beautiful on a page and easy to work on and write on and work over. The gritty gesso makes it very difficult if you're using like a micron pen or a pit pen. It tears your tips up. So you have to be a little careful in what gesso that you use. I love Dina Wakley or the Art Basics, which is a Finnabar gesso. And I know you said that you had a certain one you liked also, Melissa.
Well, the Jane Davenport,
Yes.
it comes in a tube, and I haven't bought it in a while, so I hope she still has it at Michael's. That's where I got it. It might be that you have to order it from her directly now, but it is really smooth and it's thin, but when it dries, it's so smooth. I really like it, but I haven't tried Dina's yet, and I've heard so many good things about it.
Wonderful.
So, question on the gesso. If Jess, the first one that you bought, did it say anything different? Like it was smooth versus gritty? You know what I mean?
No, it was just labeled gesso.
Interesting. So it's just how they manufacture it.
So my biggest recommendation is when you're going to buy one, you need to look online at reviews, whether on Amazon or just at blogs that have different reviews, because not all gesso is alike.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a really good tip. So I'm really glad you brought that up because they are, especially some of the off-brand ones.
Yes.
Sometimes you can buy off-brand of something and it's great, but sometimes it's not good.
It's a struggle.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, well, are we ready for fun finds?
Yes.
Sure.
I'll say real quick since I've got mine ready. My fun find has nothing to do with that, but it is art for your nails. And it is Color Street nails because I always have people ask how I did my nails or what I had done when I'm doing videos. And I use Color Street nails 100% of the time. And I have a girl that's a friend of mine on Instagram and she has a group on Facebook and I will link her below because you can go on Pinterest and get Color Street combos and do some really, really cool designs with your nails.
That's true. The only times I've ever tried to mix up my nail polish is because of you, Jess.
I know.
With Color Street.
Doing it.
I do too.
Love it.
I'm going to try those because I have used nail wraps before, but I just buy like Sally Hansen or whatever at the grocery store. And I don't love them. Are the Color Street ones easy to use?
Yes.
Because the ones that I've bought take me so long. I'm like, I could have painted my nails by now.
No.
Oh, yeah.
They're super easy.
They are. And I've tried gel nails and gel doesn't stay on me. I mean, when it first came out, they were supposed to last for 2 to 3 weeks and it barely made it a week. And I can do acrylic and all that, but that's just a lot more work. These seem to stay on me pretty well for a good 2 to 3 weeks, if not longer.
Wow.
I end up having to take them off because they grow out. And I have long nails, hard nails. Like I have good nails, but these just... like my nails will break before they start chipping.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have terrible nails and they look great.
Oh, that's good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Good one.
They're great.
What about you, Lauri?
Well, my fun find was totally inspired by our friend Ingrid, who is Caratootie on Instagram. She did something the other day with the Prima Marketing Confections watercolor pans in vintage pastel. And I had to buy it right away. These colors are gorgeous. I know that's shocking, right?
Right.
But the colors are so awesome. And they have a great color payoff. There's a black in there. And I've never seen a black watercolor dry this opaque. I was super impressed. And I'm sure you can, I just did a little swatch, so I'm sure you could lighten it up with a lot more water, but I was really impressed at how great the color was.
Yeah.
So I love those.
Yeah. Lori texted us a picture and like, look at these colors. And I was like, wow, those are really pretty. And I didn't know it was the vintage, so that makes sense why I liked them so much.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, mine is sort of paint background related a little bit. I just got this new embossing folder and I thought it was an Impress Lit, but it turns out that it wasn't an Impress Lit, but it's a 3D embossing folder and it's called Folk Doodle. It's by Jessica Scott and it is so beautiful. The 3D embossing is so pretty. And one of the tips that I didn't share before because I was saving it for my fun find was with these 3D embossing folders, because they're so high, if you take like a foam brush and just dip it in your paint, but really dry, don't get it wet. You don't want any water. And then just lightly brush it over the top. The paint will just hit the high spots on your embossed image. And you can get a really cool vintagey look like that.
Yes.
So I was playing with that yesterday and I just love that folder. It is so, so pretty. I've embossed everything that within arm's reach of me.
That's awesome.
So
I might need to buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know,
So
right?
that's definitely a good one. So that's our fun finds. And we have a challenge for you this week for your inspiration journals. We want you to create a painted background. You can use any of the paints that we talked about or one that you like and any of the techniques that we talked about, or you can share a new one that you have. And don't forget that if you use Creative Faith and Friends hashtag, we are looking for people to give prizes to. So every week we are giving prizes. And we want to announce this week our prize winner is at Mama Colors. You are our winner this week, and you are getting a $5 gift certificate to pinkpaperpeppermints.com.
Yay.
So we will be getting that to you. And thank you for using our hashtag and sharing on Instagram. And if you would like to win a prize, the three of us are taking turns either making prizes or giving something that we have in our stash or a gift certificate. So we are looking for people to give prizes to. So be sure and use that hashtag on Instagram.
Yes.
When you do your challenge.
And also, if I might just add that some of us have been pretty good about sharing your artwork if you are using our hashtag. So you might also get a little shout out in our stories.
That's right.
Yes.
In our stories or even in the newsletter. If we might be sharing in the newsletter.
Yep.
So we would love to see you working on your inspiration journals, doing some of the things that we're talking about. Well, I think that wraps it up for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we go, we just want to tell you where you can find us online. Jess, where can we find you?
I'm on Instagram and YouTube at Just Give Me Jesus and on Etsy at Choose Joy in Jesus.
And Lauri, where can we find you?
I am on YouTube and Instagram as Measure Once, Cut Twice with periods in between the words.
And you can find me at pinkpaperpeppermints.com and Pink Paper Peppermints everywhere on social media. And of course, we have all these links on the blog and in the show notes, so you can find us there too. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Well, after we finished recording, I realized we forgot to tell you our challenge word for your inspiration journal project this week, and that word is guide. You can use that to guide you in your work, either literally or figuratively. And be sure you're subscribed to my newsletter because I'll be sending out a printable gift for you to use in creating your page. If you've missed any of those printables, also they will be in the shop in the future. You can find links to everything we talked about in the show notes at pinkpaperpeppermints.com/012. And if you have a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so that other creative friends can find us, we would be so thankful for that. I'm Melissa Ohlson, and I hope you have a week filled with peace and grace, and we will see you next time on Creative Faith and Friends.